What up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Charter presented by St. Xavier University. It's a special edition today because with me, as always, is Clay Harbor. I'm Alex Shapiro, and the two of us are in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. The NFL world has descended to Mobile. There's his credential. Here's mine. I had mine on the side. We are in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. We're going to bring you all sweet Senior Bowl content. So, Clay, first off, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I love coming out to these events just because I have a personal connection with like these all-star games. Man, coming up when I was in college, I went to a smaller school. That's why I always look for these small school guys, and we'll get to that. But just a quick story. I went to the East-West Shrine game, and coming out of Missouri State, there's a lot of guys saying, how is he going to compete at this level, this level? I didn't even know, Alex. I'll tell you the truth. I was playing against Illinois State, Southern Illinois, Western Illinois. I'm playing against these schools, and I'm watching on TV. These guys have got Florida, Texas, and Alabama on their helmets. And then when I lined up at the East-West Shrine game, these guys in front of me, that's when I actually knew I could play. I could play in this league. These guys aren't any different than us. So it's always really cool for me to go and watch these events because it's just equal footing. Everybody's learning the playbook at the same time, and you'll get to see the best of the best go against each other. You see these guys on TV in certain systems. Everybody's running the same system here. You're running some watered down stuff, but you really get a good chance to look and see which prospects are the best and which guys can stand out. I mean, remember last year, easy to see right away, Ladd McConkey, 𝗵cky 𝗿𝗀, two guys that were talking about third, fourth day picks. Next thing you know, first round picks, beginning of the second round. So got a lot to talk about on day one of the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, you mentioned the small school guys. The Bears also love that. Ryan Poles is all about that. The guys who aren't afraid to go against that bigger, quote unquote, stiffer competition from the big conferences or from an FBS school. That it reveals a lot about a guy's character. And I'm sure we're going to go over some standouts. And I'm sure we have a couple of small school guys on each of our lists. So that'll be fun. We don't know each other's lists, so a little tease, that'll be fun for everybody. Right. But just first, before we get into that stuff, just kind of top level, what are you looking for this week, Clay?
So this week, usually last year, I went in, I wanted to watch a little bit of the skill positions, but obviously knowing the Bears' needs, I was really diving into the offense and defensive lines and knowing how the Bears like to build their offense and defensive lines and guys that would fit that. And we know Dennis Allen now is the Bears defensive coordinator. So defensive line, I'm looking for 3-4 defensive linemen that can apply pressure, that can push the pocket through the middle and on the edge. And then on the offensive side of the ball, Ben Johnson has some big athletic offensive linemen, some guys that were nasty, Penei Sewell, Ragnow, Glasgow. You got a bunch of guys from Detroit. You know how he likes to run a system. I need to be athletic. They need to have a specific mentality, Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson type mentality. And that's what I came in looking for. Guys that are going to compete, guys that are going to be physical, guys that can move, because I think that's what the Bears are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously our eyes are in the trenches because offensive line and defensive line is really where this team needs to get better, and certainly edge rushers. But I'm looking for guys who maybe I didn't have circled on my sheet, right? I went in with like, okay, here are guys I'm really looking forward to seeing. But I'm also interested in who's the guy who I didn't circle, who is starting to show up. And there are already a few of those names. And then another thing I'm looking for is like, who responds well to adversity? Because that was such a thing that was a problem for the Bears. That Hail Mary broke them, right? That team could not handle the adversity. Who's a player that has a bad rep or a bad, team series and then comes back and is better? Who's a guy who has a bad day 2 and then comes back on day 3 and tears it up? What's that adversity response? Is there anybody that stands out in that area? So that's kind of what I'm looking for. But then, of course, as I said off the top, offensive line and defensive line, baby. That's where the Bears, that's where the Bears are going to need improvements. And they're going to be some skill position players, right? I'm really interested in Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end. Running backs, like this team could maybe stand to add a running back. So it's not going to be all trench talk.
Yeah.
if you want some playmakers, it won't all be trench talk, but offensive line, defensive line is the focus. So without further ado, should we get into our standouts? And basically the way we pitched this to each other pre-show, we're going to take turns listing guys. We don't know who each other's guys are. We'll see if some guys get sniped, and hopefully it'll lead to some fun conversations. So Clay, without further ado, who is your first standout from day one of Senior Bowl practice?
All right, so I'm not just doing this because this guy's got an excellent first name, but his name is Clay Webb. And this is a mid-round guy. You know, I don't think he had the best day of anybody, but I think he fits that bill of a physical guy who's got that attitude. And like you said, he had a couple bad reps in there, and that was a great point. How did he respond? He came back and had a pretty good day. I know there's one clip floating around social media of him just getting bulldozed, but he comes back. He has a good day. He's physical. He's doing well in pass blocking. He's doing well in run blocking. And I liked what he did in team drill. So Webb signed with Georgia out of high school, and then he transferred to Jacksonville State. So he only had 1 year with Georgia. So I want to see, okay, this guy's been playing at Jacksonville State. He's 6'3", 210. He's a nasty run blocker. He only gave up 1 sack all year last year, which is impressive. And I think he's a guy you could sneak into that 3rd round range, 4th round range. And Clay Webb really stood out to me as just one of those grinders, a guy that could move, and he had that physicality.
Love it. I'm going to stick offensive line, and I'm also going to stick with a quote-unquote smaller program. It's 𝗗cie𝗰𝗶 out of North Dakota State. Now, I know North Dakota State is kind of the class of the FCS, but we don't think of them as a powerhouse SEC team, a powerhouse Big Ten team. And this guy lined up all over the line, really, in one-on-one drills. And I thought he was really, really solid in one-on-ones against some guys who splashed, some other guys on my list, potentially. You know, he finished with guys in the ground, which you always want to see, bringing your defensive lineman into the dirt. So that versatility, finishing in the ground, and again, coming from North Dakota State, but going up against SEC guys, going up against Big 12 guys, was totally up to the task, and could be a factor in the interior line where, you know, I think we expect the Bears to make some changes on the interior of that line.
And it's funny you say 𝗗cie𝗰𝗶, because this is a guy I've watched the last 3 years, Alex. So, you know, I don't know if you do know, but I do color commentary for the Missouri Valley Football Conference and the MAC. And 𝗗cie𝗰𝗶, he's just a monster. He's 6'6", he's 300 pounds. I remember being down in the field before the game. I'm calling the game against Illinois State down in Bloomington. And who the heck is this guy? And then, you know, you talk to the other sports information guys, the other color commentary guys, and you ask them, hey, who's your guys' top guys? And you ask about the offensive line, defensive line. 𝗗cie𝗰𝗶. So I'm watching him, and he was just opening up holes all game. He's athletic. He can move. That's a great pick. I didn't get to see him at practice because I was a little bit late getting in. But just knowing this guy, watching him week in and week out for the past few years, he's a player, and he's a guy I think definitely would maybe 2nd roundish. He's starting to make a name for himself out there at the Senior Bowl, so maybe he gets plucked a little quicker. But I think he's a guy, if he's there, you know, 2nd round, 3rd round, you take a flyer on him.
All right, who's your second standout, Clay?
I'm going to go one more offensive lineman just because the Bears offensive line gave up 68 sacks last year, and I really like this guy, and I think you did too because we were talking about him. But that's Carson Vincent, and I'm reading my notes on him right now. But he was a guy they line up. Usually they line up the best players at the end of practice, and they let him go one-on-one. He was the guy that the offensive coaching staff picked. What I loved about him is his competitiveness. It reminded me last year when I came down here and I was watching Quinyon Mitchell. And I just keep going back. Quinyon, and the receivers that were here last year, I was talking about 𝗵𝗛, Ladd McConkey, Luke McCaffrey. There was a bunch of big-name receivers just making plays. Quinyon Mitchell locked up everyone. He was competitive, and he showed some personality. He's pounding his chest. He's fighting. I like guys like that. That shows me they love football. Now, even though I was never that guy, you know, I was more reserved, but He shows me he loves football, shows me he likes what he's doing. This guy's just ultra competitive. He went to Alabama A&M, right? When I'm doing my notes before, he's not a big guy that stands out. You look and you say, okay, Alabama A&M, got to do something to get there. This guy is just dirty, nasty, good in pass pro, won almost every rep. He's got length. He might be a little raw because he's coming out of Alabama A&M, but that was my question. Can he play against these big name guys? He did. Not only did he compete with them, he's getting up there. He's celebrating after he buries a guy. He's knocking his chest. He's showing, and he is ultra confident and competitive. I'd love to see that from a guy, but also a small school guy coming from Alabama A&M. That's the SWAC conference there, Alex. Who knows what the SWAC conference is? Who's he going against over there? You're pass rushing him at the SWAC. And he comes in here, the Senior Bowl, going against the best defensive line. Some people said in the last 15 years of the Senior Bowl, and he has a lights out day. I'm excited to get back and see him tomorrow. But Carson Vincent is a guy that we need to have our eyes on in Chicago.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite moments. We're gonna have a favorite moment segment after this, but that was phenomenal, right? It was Shamar Stewart who he really stood up there, and push-ups were on the line. So I mean, that's 25. Even a bigger moment, right? So exactly. So the defense had to do the push-ups because Vincent won that rep. That's a great call. It's a great pick, Clay. After practice, I found him and I had just enough time to ask him about that one moment. Like, hey, like coach put you out there for the push-ups rep.
Yeah. What do you say about that?
So it was great. He was basically like, listen, this is a blessing, this opportunity. And I feel like this is the culmination of my work of like what I've been doing to get to this moment. And then it speaks to that confidence that you were talking about, Clay, that came through. He goes, however, I am not playing above my level. This is my level. And then this was phenomenal. I am Carson Vincent, and this is what I do. So it was just like,
that's what he said. I love it.
I am Carson Vincent, and this is what I do. So it was like, okay, I had time for one question with you, and that was, I know everything about you already, Carson Vincent. That was perfect. So it's exactly what we were talking about, right? This is a guy who's getting the opportunity now to go up against Texas A&M guys, go up against Tennessee guys, and show him what he's got. And in that moment, he was absolutely up to the task. So phenomenal pick, Clay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to the SEC and let's switch to the other side of the trenches. I am going to select as a standout Omar Norman Lott, who's a defensive lineman. He, I think, played over the line, outside to inside at Tennessee, and he transferred. I believe he was at ASU before that. But today I really saw him playing in the interior. And the one thing that really stood out for me about this guy, the get off was crazy good. I mean,
one of the guys I had pegged too, by the way.
You did?
Yeah. Okay. That means, hey, we're both seeing the same things.
Love it. Love to hear it. Ball was snapped. Dude's like in the backfield. There was one fumble. It was hard to tell if he caused the fumble, but he was like right in the middle of it because of all that get off. And it's interesting because I don't believe he was a starter really at Tennessee. I think he was more of a rotational guy. Did not get a chance to talk with him, but he was one of those dudes who I didn't have circled because, you're looking for the starters, you're looking for the stars. And, I probably see, this is a rotational guy. Okay, whatever, move on with my life. But his get off was instantly noticeable. I put some videos up there on social media. And if you scrub through, I mean, ball is snapped and he is like moving instantaneously. It was really impressive get off. So Omar Norman Lott, defensive lineman, rotational dude, but made his mark.
Yeah, I really like him. He's got a great first step. He's got long arms. Guy can play against the run, but also pass rush. And the Bears need some pass rush. And I'm going to go with another SEC guy, and that's Jared Ivey. He was wearing number 15 out there, but defensive end. And he's just another guy. Just popped. He's a guy that could play D end. He might be able to move inside a little bit, but long arms, good get off, physicality. The guy can move. I think he's able to spill on the outside gap runs. He's a guy that I think can play in both the run and the pass. And I think he's a guy, another one of those guys that you could catch in that second round there, 39, 41, somewhere the Bears would have an opportunity. Jared Ivey, I think a bunch of upside, athletic. Loved what I saw from him.
Love it. All right, I have one more trenches guy, and then I have one skill position playmaker. So I do have a playmaker.
Yeah.
But my last trenches guy is 𝗵cije𝗶𝗹. And this is a guy who, again, really flashed in the team period for me. He was for the national team. And pretty much the moment team period started, he was just, again, bam, backfield. Interior defensive line guy, had 2 quote unquote TFLs. You know, it's not exactly live tackling out there. But he was getting the stops. He was getting the disruption where that also, you know, caught my eye that the second they start playing 11 on 11, something that resembles football, this guy's in there. He's creating a ruckus. So 𝗵cije𝗶𝗹. Oh, and then one more. So there was a one-on-one rep that he had with 𝗗cie𝗰𝗶, and we already spoke about how 𝗗cie𝗰𝗶 was really impressive. And 𝗍𝒡 nearly took him to the ground. I think 𝗍𝒡 probably still won the rep overall, but I love the motor that he showed because he nearly got taken to the ground and then he kind of like fought back up and then was like, I ain't done with you yet. And they ended up having a pretty long rep, a very much through the echo of the whistle type rep, where each of those guys were competing, where it, you know, again, it looked like 𝗍𝒡 beat him, but he kind of fought back, was like, I didn't hear no bell. So
Rocky,
so,
I love the Rocky reference, man.
Exactly. So 𝗵cije𝗶𝗹 stood out to me today.
All right, I'll take your lead on this one, and I'll do one more trenches, and then I'll give my playmaker from the practice. Like I said, I was really focused on the trenches today, but there was a couple guys that stood out on the edge. And this is another guy who does come from a small school, standout high school, whatever. Then he goes to Coastal Carolina, where he started 38 consecutive games. Then he transferred to North Carolina his senior season, where he played 11 consecutive games, and that's 𝗚ille 𝗬𝗡𝗀. So this guy is obviously, like I said, he's in the trenches, offensive line. I think he's a guy that could play multiple positions up front. He can move from guard. I think he could play a little tackle. I think you might even be able to try him out a little bit at center, even though he might be a little tall for that. But vicious, physical guy. Love that. Try hard guy. In my notes, kept pulling him up. Whenever I see a good play, I'll just type quick. You know, it's quick. Physical. Good drive. Good drive. Physical. And I just kept seeing the same thing. So this guy, 𝗚ille 𝗬𝗡𝗀, is a physical player. Ryan Poles goes, turns on the film. He starts looking at this guy. It's the type of players that they need. Resembles a Detroit Lions offensive lineman. Loved what I saw from him. The best thing, we don't like our linemen. Like, I love Tevin Jenkins. I think my comp with him was Tevin Jenkins. Reminds me of Tevin Jenkins. He's played 49 consecutive games. This is a guy that's very healthy, right? And these guys going to be available. So the best ability is availability. So I love what I saw from him. And he's a guy that stays healthy. 𝗚ille 𝗬𝗡𝗀, one of my top guys today.
Love it. We love offensive linemen who stay on the field, Clay. So that's wonderful. All right, my last dude, Trevor Etienne, running back, Georgia, where, you know, I was kind of watching before coming here Cam Skattebo tape because he looks like David Montgomery, and, you know, obviously Ashton Jeanty is, you know, the big name, this, that, and the other thing. I thought Trevor Etienne was really impressive, especially as a pass catcher, which is important, right? To be able to add that pass catching ability is going to be a big deal. And it was the way he was doing it out of the backfield. Solid route running. I mean, juking guys out of their feet in one-on-ones, and then obviously completing the play. So, you know, it's kind of hard to sometimes judge the running backs when it's walk-through speed, or when, you know, they're doing 11-on-11 drills, but kind of thudding and not all the way hitting and all that stuff. But in these moments, like, okay, a one-on-one drill where he's pass catching out of the backfield, I feel like I got a good sense that, oh yeah, Trevor Etienne could be a pass catching mismatch type player in an offense. And then obviously you just have to watch Georgia to see what he does as a running back. So Trevor Etienne caught my eye today, pass catcher.
No, love that pick. Just from what I've seen on him watching college football, I mean, he's a guy that, like you said, he's versatile. And the Lions, Ben Johnson really appreciates versatility. I mean, you look at Jahmyr Gibbs. They had running backs, and they drafted a running back in the first round. I remember being over at your former employer, NBC Sports Chicago, doing the draft special. All of us say, who had the worst draft? We said, and not that I hate Jahmyr Gibbs, just the fact, like, what are they doing? They're drafting the positions. If you find a playmaker that you like, a guy like Etienne that can catch, that can run, that can do everything, it's hard to pass that guy up. So my playmaker is Jack Betch. I don't know if it's Beck. I think it's Betch. He's a wide receiver from TCU. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but this guy can straight up run. He reminds me a little bit of what I saw from Ladd McConkey last year at Senior Bowl. Obviously, didn't pop as much as Ladd did, but Betch is a guy that runs crisp routes, in and out of routes. And I watched him a little bit in team drill. He's downfield blocking like he's an offensive lineman. He's a physical player. And if you watch, the reason the Lions' run game was so good is because those receivers were great blockers. He made an excellent catch over the middle on one play that I was just like, check this man's gloves. He's got Stickum on there, but not the biggest guy. He's a slot guy. But I think that could fit in with the Bears, because who do we know they got coming back is Rome and DJ, and those guys predominantly play outside. Keenan Allen is the slot machine. We don't know if Keenan Allen's coming back. Who knows? It's a possibility, but he would be a guy that could fit in there. And once again, he's not going to be the first round pick, but he's a guy later on in that second to third range that I think he could do well. Last year, according to PFF, had 18 missed tackles forced. He's got great run after catch, had 14 contested catches, had over 1,000 yards. So I think this guy's an underrated, under the radar pass catcher that would fit the mold of a guy that Ben Johnson would like to throw the ball to. I'm not saying he's Amon-Ra St. Brown, but he can play slot. And then you saw him line up a little bit outside, and he was successful in both. And if you look at him, you probably think this guy's an accountant, but this guy can straight up play football. And that's what I love about the Senior Bowl is you go out there and everybody's on equal footing. Everybody's learning an offense, a quick little system. Everybody's on the same. And he showed up today. Jake Betch, loved what I saw from him.
Love it. I do have an honorable mention. I lied. I had one more on my sheet that I missed.
Yeah,
so I'll allow you an honorable mention if you want as well. My honorable mention goes out to Anthony Belton, who is listed as a tackle, but actually played a bunch inside. And I just wrote his number down a lot.
Yeah.
I don't have specific notes, which is why he's an honorable mention. So that's on me. That's on me. I don't have specific numbers or notes on him, but I wrote his number down a lot, which is a good thing if you caught my eye multiple times. So Anthony Belton.
All right. If I have a honorable mention, be in the trenches again, Jacob Bayer, he had an up and down game, but like you said, I just wrote his name down quite a bit, and he's a guy that can play multiple positions as well. Obviously he's at the Senior Bowl for a reason, but he's one of those guys that you see come out there and you don't hear much from him when you're doing your prep and you're looking at the guys people are looking for. He's a guy that's physical. He's able to play multiple positions. I saw him at guard. I saw him at a tackle. So I really like Jake Bayer as well.
Great. Love it. Clay, let's go to the specific moments of the day that were really wonderful. We talked about the Carson Vincent rep a lot. And that was truly a wonderful moment. But I'm wondering if there was any play, any rep, any moment that really was like, okay, yeah, this is what we're here for. This is what it's all about.
I love the competitiveness, man. Obviously, we're over there watching the one-on-ones. Everybody's cheering for each other. Everybody's, hyped up for these moments. But the way they competed out there was really special. And I know being a part of these all-star games is that they are huge, and you can really change your draft spot a lot in these short practices. But overall, I would say just the competitiveness from the one-on-ones and the individuals and just transferring over to the team stuff. And we got to see a lot of good stuff. And obviously we're going to start breaking down tape too. We're going right now off the naked eye, the guys that stood out. And I think those guys will still show up on tape. But I just really like the energy out there. And as far as a specific moment, I mean, that, the end of the practice, you had the DBs going against the receivers. You had the offensive line, D line, everybody crowding around. That was fun.
Yeah. For me, one moment was Brendan Adams, cornerback, picked off Riley Leonard on a deep ball where he had the dude totally covered up. But Riley Leonard, it's not like he's going to throw the ball away, right?
Yeah.
You throw the pass. So he obviously puts it up to, give his guy a shot. And Brandon Adams came down with the interception. And I mean, I was at the opposite end of the field. You kind of like watching over here for the O-line wrap, and then like, okay, I'll watch over there for the wide receiver CB one-on-one. I was at the opposite end of the field, and he was yelling so loudly that I could hear him clear as day. I'm sure everybody in that stadium heard him clear as day. I told y'all, I get money.
No, he didn't. Oh, wow.
It was mainly I told y'all. I'm fairly certain it was I get money. And plays like that are plays that will get you paid, Mr. Adams. So again, speaking to the competitive nature of it, like he gets a pick, it's a big hype moment, and he is hype and feeling himself and letting everybody know. And so that was a standout moment for me.
I love it.
Okay. So Clay, one thing that we did not notice out on the field was GM Ryan Poles or head coach Ben Johnson for the Chicago Bears. Now, that does not mean that these guys were not at the Senior Bowl. They could be here, but maybe they just weren't on the sidelines. Maybe they were somewhere else. Maybe we simply didn't see them. But, I kind of had my eyes peeled for those guys, and I think other people had their eyes peeled for those guys because, Flus would be here, and Ryan Poles seemed like he was always here, but I did not see them at all. So is that surprising to you that, Senior Bowl number 4 for Ryan Poles and doesn't make an appearance on the sidelines, at least that we noticed? And it's not like these guys are noticeable. You see Mike Tomlin out there. You see Kevin Stefanski out there. You see these guys out there. So does that surprise you at all that we did not spot Ben Johnson or Ryan Poles today?
It does, because those guys were, they're typically out there. You usually see those guys, Ian Cunningham even. And I think it's just the situation that the organization, just went through with this exhaustive search with all the coaches. And then Ian Cunningham right now, obviously going through his own interview process. I think that it would have had to be, pretty special for them to be out there. And I know he's got scouts there and he's going to watch the tape, but I was surprised. And I don't think that this is going to make him miss anything, but it goes back to when they drafted Darnell Wright. Poles, he fell in love with Darnell Wright during the Senior Bowl. He would sit behind him in meetings. He would talk to the guy. He just would talk about how he fell in love with him and Darnell Wright. That was the 10th overall pick. The guy we traded Jalen Carter for. And that's where he found him, being at the Senior Bowl personally. So for me, a guy that has found a solid right tackle at the Senior Bowl, being there in person, it is a little bit surprising that he wasn't there. I think obviously he could trust his scouts. He's going to watch the tape and everything there. But I think there is something that does get lost in the translation when you're not interacting with these guys, seeing how they are in drills when they're not in, seeing how they are, when the camera's not rolling, maybe going through some of these individuals. So I think there's something to be said for them not being there, or us not seeing them. Maybe he was up in the booth, staying out of the sun. And obviously you weren't up in the booth staying out of the sun, with you look
I got scorched.
You got a little sun.
You got sunburn in January in Alabama. I learned that. That's probably my number one takeaway. You get sunburn in January in Alabama. That is not how it goes in Chicago. And it wasn't like a hot day.
Yeah, I got a little extra pigment, so I was fine. But Alex, looks like you got the worst of it there. But there's something to be said for him not being there. A little shocking.
Yes, if you are not watching on YouTube, I got a little pink. So yes, Clay, very, very observant. That a little pink today. So yeah, he could be there, and yeah, the Bears have typically really put a lot of value and a lot of stock in the Senior Bowl. So we'll see. We'll see if those guys make an appearance down the stretch the next couple days. But yeah, I was definitely surprised because we know that these guys place stock in these Senior Bowl practices for all the reasons that you listed. Okay, before we get out of here, we do need to talk about a couple coordinators who got hired. Number one, Dennis Allen, former head coach for the New Orleans Saints, former defensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints, and then also Declan Doyle from Denver, and then he was also with the New Orleans Saints. But let's start with Dennis Allen because, Clay, you were on a Saints team where Dennis Allen was the defensive coordinator. So, Clay, please share with us just your thoughts on Dennis Allen and what the Bears are getting in him as a defensive coordinator.
Excuse me. He's a highly respected guy. He's one of those guys, when he talks, you're listening. He's not overly fiery, but he will let you know when you mess something up. Like he's not one of those guys that's going to let you get away with, not being accountable for what you're supposed to be doing. So I really love the hire. And you go back, he's had a top 10 scoring defense 4 of his last seasons when he's calling plays. Obviously, you look at his head coaching record, not the best, but I like this for 2 reasons. First is he does run a 4-3 scheme. He likes to play a little bit of quarters. I think our safety, well, if Jaquan Brisker, who knows what happens with him, but a lot of safety rotation, guys playing down in the box. And I think Byard and Brisker, if he's healthy, could do well with that. And we hope that Brisker could play. I think they obviously have to have a good backup plan there. And he is just a great defensive mind. He's a guy, it's like Vic Fangio, Steve Spagnuolo. You look at those guys as head coaches, they weren't great, but these are defensive minds. These are guys that are very capable. And I'm actually surprised that they were able to get him as the defensive coordinator. So now I think you got 2 great play callers as an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator. This is a guy that accountability is huge for him. Obviously, the time he spent under Sean Payton. Sean Payton's all about accountability. Sean Payton's going to let you know when you did something wrong, and he's not going to be nice about it. Dennis Allen comes up in that same tree, and obviously his reputation precedes him. Great defensive mind, but a guy that has proven year in and year out that he does know how to call defense. So I think it's an excellent hire. And then also, he's a guy that can help you set up your program. If Ben Johnson needs help with anything, this guy's been a head coach for several years. He knows how to set up the meetings. He knows how to set up what do you do for the travel here? What do you do for how should we schedule this, the scheduling? So this is a guy that's done it before, can help in all this stuff. So you don't just got a rookie head coach that's trying to figure this all out as it comes up. You got a guy that's been there and done it for years, and there's nothing that can replace that experience. So I really do love this hire.
Yeah, that last bit is what I want to underline is the experience factor, right? And that's something we talked about. Hey, rookie head coach who has only had 1 stint as an offensive coordinator, right? It's not like he has this extensive history of being a coordinator. He was only a coordinator for his time in Detroit. So how do you help him out? You get a super experienced coordinator on his staff for him to bounce ideas off of. So yeah, Clay, absolutely. That's what stands out to me. And obviously, his defenses performed well and got better as he was a coordinator, right? When he took over the Saints, it was not good. That defense was extremely bad. But then year by year by year by year, they get better and better and better and better. So that growth is really important and really cool.
Ben Johnson did say, he said, I never met him, but when I played against him, because I respected the heck out of that defense. They are hard defense to get. And then what Ben Johnson did single out when he was talking about him was, this guy has one of the best 3rd down and one of the best red zone defenses that you see. And the Bears this year, near the end of the season, second half of the season, struggled mightily on 3rd down. So this is a guy on the money downs, when it matters most, knows what to dial up. He's not afraid to blitz. He's not afraid to play coverage. He will attack the offense's weaknesses. And I think that's what makes a great coach, is not just sticking to my stuff. Find out where they're weak and attack them there, and have some, be able to be dynamic in that type of a situation. And that's something he can do. And Ben Johnson even alluded to that when asked what he liked about this hire with Dennis Allen. So I think that's important as well.
Love it. All right. Now, Declan Doyle, kind of, you know, a lesser heralded name. Dennis Allen, it was like, okay, when Ben Johnson was hired, there was this kind of immediate Dennis Allen smoke, and it was like, okay, yeah, he has that history as a DC. He has the head coach. You can see the connected dots. And then Declan Doyle kind of came out of left field a little bit, but he is also from that Sean Payton pipeline. He spent that time also with the Saints as an offensive assistant. And then, very importantly, as we are finding out, worked with Dan Campbell, worked with Aaron Glenn. Ben Johnson obviously worked with Dan Campbell, worked with Aaron Glenn in Detroit. So it seems like those two guys, you know, if you got the recommendation from one of those two guys, Ben Johnson, all he had to do was text him, hey, how was Declan in New Orleans? And, you know, obviously that seems to be going a long way here. Those connections, Ben Johnson leaning on his network, leaning on his connection for those recommendations. So just your thoughts on Declan Doyle.
Yeah, so let's just read this quick little paraphrasing that Ben Johnson said. He said, it's going to be critical for me to find someone that can organize and structure and set the table, particularly early in the week, for game planning. You know, he's been around a number of guys that have called plays in the past, and he's seen potential pitfalls that could arise when you approach an entire football team and you can't get as much watching tape early in the week as you possibly could. He needs somebody to set up and help him game plan, because he's running the full team. And Declan is a guy that is a rising star. He's known as a diligent worker. He can put together game plans. He's a guy that has worked his way up. Obviously, he was a tight end coach, but he just comes so highly recommended that you think that this guy is one of these stars, like a Kevin O'Connell type. Young guy, gets his opportunity, just going to work his tail off. And I like the hire. You know, these young guys, they're hungry. The young whiz kid is going to help him set up his offense. And obviously, this is Ben Johnson's offense. For all intents and purposes, Ben Johnson is the offensive coordinator, but I think this is also a good hire.
Right. You know, Ben Johnson's going to call the plays and he's going to do all that. But obviously, you still need, as you said, that help organizing, that help getting ready. You know, just hearing kind of the buzz around Declan Doyle.
Yeah.
Seems like a very smart guy. That's the word that comes up over and over, is smart. And actually saw Jari Evans on the practice field. He played for the Saints a long time, was a Saints Bill Walsh. I want to say he was their Bill Walsh intern for one of the years that Declan Doyle was there as an assistant. And he was like, yeah, you know, he was there. It didn't seem like they had a really strong relationship, but he said, like, again, the things that really showed up were smart and his use of computer technology to help him. Like, he was like, yeah, this guy was using tech
Chat GPT
to really help us out. So that kind of forward thinking, smart guy. These are the things that we're hearing about Declan Doyle. But yes, I mean, he is the offensive coordinator, but this is going to be Ben Johnson's offense, and Ben Johnson is going to be calling the plays, but certainly viewed as an up-and-comer, in this league. So we'll see where that goes with Declan Doyle.
Same thing with JT Barrett as the quarterback's coach. I like this hire too. You're getting a young guy that has played the game, and this guy's 30 years old. So I think he's going to be able to connect with Caleb. He knows what he's going through. He's been in situations. He's dropped back in the pocket. He knows what it's like when pressure's in your face, and he's gonna be able to help this guy figure things out. I really like the JT Barrett, another one of those guys. You just hear so many good things about us when he was an assistant, how hard of a worker he is. So I'm excited for JT Barrett as well. Were you a little shocked when you heard that 30-year-old JT Barrett was going to be the quarterback coach?
I wasn't shocked. It was just like, oh yeah, the OSU guy.
Yeah.
The OSU student. He was really fun at OSU. Oh,
yeah.
He's a coach now. Whoa. So I guess it wasn't shocked. It was just like a trip down memory lane where it's here's the big thought that I had about that. And again, you also mentioned this, so I'm just continuing to parrot things you say. But the thing that stood out for me with that was former player who is a coach, which is something the Bears that didn't necessarily feel like a priority under Matt Eberflus was getting guys who have played the game on that coaching staff. And that was a huge priority for Dan Campbell. He wanted as many dudes who had played in the league as possible to be on that staff, because obviously you're better able to relate to those guys. You know what they have gone through. You know what it takes to succeed. You know things that are going to lead to you not succeeding. So having lots of those guys on the staff.
Al Harris. Yeah. I mean,
Al Harris. Exactly. Yeah. So Al Harris, JT Barrett, these are guys who have played in the league, and having more of those guys on the staff, it seems like a real shift. That's the sense that I got after the JT Barrett. It's like, okay, there's a little bit of a trend here with these position coaches.
And I love that about Dan Campbell when he was my tight end coach with the Lions, right? Knowing there's a different way you can connect with a guy. Dan Campbell played 10 years in the league. He's leading your meetings. He knows exactly what you're going through. A guy beats you on a certain play. He's been there. He's experienced it. And he's going to be able to tell you some techniques. And there are good coaches that haven't played, but I think it just adds a whole nother level of respect when you have guys that have been successful in the league and college that have played the game. Al Harris, like Dan Campbell. And I'm not shocked that Ben Johnson's taken a page out of that book. But, Ben Johnson played in college as a backup. He's not a NFL guy that, spent a long time in the league, but now he does know that it does matter to get former players in there to teach players. So I love that. And just going back to Dan Campbell, and I know when I was in Jacksonville, the tight end coach that helped me the most my entire career, Dan Campbell, I only spent a year with, but Rod Middleton, he's still a tight end coach to this day. The guy played 10 years in the league back in the day, old school player. And he was just a guy that knew everything there was to know about playing tight end because he had experience. Not a guy that's just teaching you something and thinks you're gonna get it. He can get out there, he can demonstrate it, he can tell you exactly what it's gonna feel like, taste like, smell like. He's been there, he's been in the pads, he's done it before. So I love the hires of these former players. They command respect because they've done it. They've done it at a high level. What are you going to say to a guy, Al Harris? If you can't get to the ball, it's Al Harris. You get to that ball. I've been there before. I've done it. You do this. You got to get this done. So it just commands a whole other level of respect.
What does playing tight end taste like? You said he knows what it tastes like, smells like. What does playing tight end taste like, Clay?
I never wore a mouthpiece. I mean, it tastes like a lot of dry mouth because you're tired and breathing heavy. So it's an interesting taste at tight end.
Amazing. All right. Hey, come to the Charter podcast for Senior Bowl nuggets. Stay for the really insightful moments about playing tight end in the league with Clay Hart. Yeah. I mean, you cannot get that anywhere else, folks. You gotta get that here at the Charter podcast. Clay, before we get out of here, anything else? Any final thoughts?
No, I loved what I saw at the Senior Bowl. Obviously, we're going to continue watching the trenches because we know the Bears got to build up the trenches. When I look at this roster, I think trenches obviously is the number one thing. But then you got to remember Ben Johnson, and I was just listening a little bit to some Chicago sports talk radio, and they're talking about how Ben Johnson's agent was kind of talking about, hey, yeah, we're going to work together and we're going to build the roster towards players that we think can play in this system. So I think some guys that we think are safe and we're penciling in, I don't know if I'm talking linebacker, edge rusher here, running backs. I don't know who we're talking about, but there is going to be some surprises. So we're gonna be looking at everything in the Senior Bowl because I don't think any position is going to be off limit for the Bears in the draft and free agency. So we got to keep our eyes open out there.
We talked about it as soon as he was hired. DeAndre Swift, the contract might not get cut, right? Because of the contract right away. But I mean, this is a guy that the Lions drafted. It didn't work out, and they moved on to Jahmyr Gibbs. You said it earlier in the show. The NFL world roasted him. He roasted the Lions for drafting Jahmyr Gibbs. Nobody is laughing anymore because Jahmyr Gibbs looks like one of the best running backs in the NFL and fit what they were trying to do so well. So yes, I mean, that is a microcosm. We're personally interested in what becomes of DeAndre Swift and what Ben Johnson's, being the head coach means for the running back room specifically. But you are absolutely right. There are going to be changes. It was just like when Ryan Poles took over. I remember when Ryan Poles took over, it was like, hey, get ready to say goodbye to a lot of players that are marquee players. And people are like, wait, what are you talking about? And then what happens? Bam, Khalil Mack out of there.
Robert Quinn, Roquan Smith. Yeah.
Right. Out of there. So new guys have new ideas. There's going to be change. And it will be very interesting to see how that change comes about. So great call, Clay. All right. For Clay Harbor, I am Alex Shapiro. Thank you once again for listening to the Charter Podcast presented by St. Xavier University. We are going to be here in Mobile all week. So be sure to stick with CHSN for all of the practice videos, the recaps, et cetera, and we will have more Senior Bowl content for you with our next episode. So until then, have a wonderful week, everybody.